I don't know about y'all, but the last 6 months of my life have been literally insane. If you would have told me when I quit my job in July that I'd still be doing content full time 7 months later, there's no way I would have believed you. So with all that happening, I'm like in a stage of my life where I'm really shedding like tons of old baggage that I didn't even know I was carrying, like negative thoughts and belief, bad habits, bad friends, which we'll talk about later. But since I've been going through a lot of change the last 6 months, it really got me thinking about growth and the reality of it. Because a lot of people talk about growth like this thing to strive for that's like positive and easy and fun, but a lot of the time growth is actually so ugly and so painful. So I think it's time that we had an honest conversation about it. When we think about growth, we usually think of things like encouraging quotes, journaling, some sort of greenery, self-love, all things that I like to think of as like the growth aesthetic. So we're talking minimalism, neutral colors, a photo at Pilates class, a nice matcha. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with any of these things and I actually like them. But it doesn't give us like an honest look as to what growing is really like. And a lot of times people can like really buy into this growth aesthetic and like preach it and post it, but have a lot of difficulty in their actual life. And they don't know how to like communicate that or put that out there or share that because none of that is supposed to be part of like the growth aesthetic. You don't see that. So let's start with the truth. Before any kind of growth happens in your actual life, what you first have usually is that oh crap moment. And I'm not talking about like something major that happened for like the whole world to see. I'm talking about that internal change where something happened and the flip was switched. You pick up on something that you hadn't realized before, or you notice something that you hadn't about yourself or the world around you. You go through that moment of realization and usually you get it quietly because it's internal, where you know that it was like a small change, but it feels monumental and you know you just can't go back to ever looking at things the same way. Welcome to the stage of uncomfortability. You know that moment when you're like 24, 25, 26, and you're like, wait, like I'm actually a whole adult and I need to get my life together. I need to make a change. That's that realization moment where now you notice something and you feel like you have to make a change. And you can have this moment with literally anything in life. I had it last year whenever I knew it was time to quit my job. I had it when I felt like it was time for me to finally leave LA. And I had it also in regards to like the people that I was calling my friends. And when you're in this realization stage, that's when you really decide like what kind of person you're gonna be, because you're gonna be taking like a good hard look at yourself and being like, now what? And you can take one of two paths. Either you make a change or you choose to ignore that realization moment and instead stick with what you know. And people generally won't admit to it, but a lot of us tend to take option B because we think if we stick to what we know and we choose to ignore the realization we had, then things are gonna go back to normal and we're gonna be fine. But what really happens is that feeling of being uncomfortable just grows and it starts to shape you and change you anyway because you chose to internalize that uncomfortable realization instead of confronting it. Usually you'll end up being less happy. You start to like look at other people different and even like lash out at your friends and your family over random things because what you actually did was put yourself in defense mode because you chose to live in that uncomfortable space. When kids are growing up and they go from more like a size 2 to a size 4, if their parents don't put them in that size 4 clothes, what can we expect to happen? The child is going to be uncomfortable and get mad. And so they're going to start to like lash out and throw temper tantrums, probably because they're like not that good yet at expressing themselves. This is literally the same thing. You know that your old habits and your old friendships don't suit your lifestyle and your spirit anymore, but you're not allowing yourself to make room for the things that do. On the other hand, you can go with option A, which is to have that realization and then choose to acknowledge it, which in turn allows you to like step into the next chapter of your life. So this part right here where you have to choose between either A or B is really like the make or break point. Either this is a stepping stone for you and you can allow yourself to step into the new era of your life, or you hit the brakes, dig your heels in, and allow yourself to get stuck. Now let's get one thing straight. Just because you choose to acknowledge your realization doesn't necessarily mean that things are going to get easier. If anything, I think things are just as hard, if not harder, because when you're on this path, you encounter a ton of resistance. You start to doubt yourself, you get a little impatient, you get pushback from the people in your life because they either don't agree or they don't understand it. And so it really becomes an uphill battle because of those things. So from the moment that you choose to like acknowledge that realization and try to like change or fix it, everything from there on out is going to be a continuous choice. And that is what the whole growth aesthetic doesn't tell you. That because there's all that resistance, you're going to have to constantly choose to stay on that growth journey. And that's where all that pain and that difficulty and that loneliness comes in. Y'all know that saying like friends for a reason, friends for a season, and friends for a lifetime? Well, it's very true. And it's something that you're going to have to come to terms with in your self-development journey, because you will have friends who don't understand. And you're going to have friends who are going to look at you different, or they're going to say that like now you think you're better than them because you want to be a better version of yourself. I've seen it happen, I've lived it, and unfortunately it's just reality. Now don't get me wrong, I still have love for some of my old friends, but because I'm on this growth journey, I had to come to the conclusion and the realization that I couldn't keep some of those old friendships. And it was really hard for me because I was one of those kids who like moved around a lot, so I always like yearned to have like lifelong friendships. So, you know, getting rid of some friends that I already had like invested like time and years and experiences into was super difficult. But I saw the way that people were like starting to move and like the comments that were being made around me, and it made me realize that A, they didn't really like me or respect me in the way that I thought, or B, they just didn't operate from like a place of like love and joy and encouragement. And if I'm trying to grow as a person and get better and build healthy relationships, where do friendships like that fit in? So at the end of the day, I just had to ask myself, what's more important? Friends who don't view me and respect me the same way that I view them, or the vision that I have for my life. And even outside of friendships, there's going to be other difficult decisions to make, like whether or not to leave your job when it's draining the life out of you, whether or not to move away from your parents even though you're going to miss them, if you're going to continue to keep going out with your friends whenever you said you needed to save money and stay inside so you can focus on your goals. I even had to leave like a 6-year relationship at one point because I thought that we both had the same like long-term vision for our lives. But then my boyfriend told me like out of the blue that he wanted to stay where he was, didn't want to move, was happy with what he was doing. And I remember that day like it just happened, even though it was literally like 8 years ago at this point. And just like I mentioned earlier about the whole realization moment, it was literally just like a casual conversation in the car. I remember him driving and him saying this, and literally all I could do was just stare at him. I couldn't even say anything because inside it was just one casual comment, but I felt like I was hit with like a ton of bricks, and I just couldn't like see him or our relationship or where it was going the same way anymore because I just knew in that moment. I knew a shift had happened, and I eventually just made a choice to end things. And that led to me feeling heartbroken because how else would you feel when you just shared 6 years of your life with somebody? I also felt super lonely because that person was my best friend. And even outside of that, we had a ton of mutual friends too. So when that relationship ended, I didn't feel like I could turn to those people and speak to them in confidence. It was a full reset. And honestly, like I could have gone back to that relationship, but through all the pain and the loneliness and the difficulty, I had to continuously choose to not go back and to remind myself of the life that I wanted that he no longer wanted. Your growth as a person is fully dependent on you making those continuous choices and to stay committed to your growth. You don't have to be perfect and hit 100% of the time, but you do have to continuously pick the vision and pick the goal if you actually want to get there. And that's where all the pain and the loneliness and the difficulty comes in. Because at times you're gonna have to miss out on things that are happening. You might have to step away from your relationship. You might have to step away from friends that are no longer good for you. In some way, shape, or form, you're gonna have to start from scratch. You're gonna have to build the reality that you wanna live. And you're always gonna have to choose yourself and your journey if you're serious about growing. But even as hard as it is, it's always worth it. So don't be that person that chooses to live in that uncomfortable realization. Go back to last week's video if you need it and like remind yourself on like how to support yourself, how to show up for yourself, because that's part of your growth journey too. And just allow yourself to be the person that God has called you to be. I feel like the video got a little heavy or a little deep this week, but honestly, like we do have to dig deep sometimes if we're going to talk about these things and be honest and be on this journey together. But don't worry, next week's video will be a little bit lighter because we can't be going super deep and super serious all the time. So with that, I'll see you guys in my YouTube shorts. And yes, I have some new ones coming, so don't worry. Do keep an eye out for those for when they pop up. And also don't forget to like check in next Saturday for the new video.